But our focus today on the big meeting that was held by Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Union Home Minister Amit Shah on Jammu and Kashmir. The big icebreaker, the first meeting since Article 370 was repealed in August 2019. The big takeaways. Prime Minister Modi's one line for the day first. I want to remove dilli se doori and dil ki doori. Kashmir political parties stuck to their demand for statehood or restoration of statehood and Article 370 being restored. The centre says statehood will be restored at the right time. The centre remained silent on Article 370, saying the matter was sub judice. The centre says it plans assembly elections after delimitation of constituencies. No time frame has been given for assembly elections in J&K as of now. So what was really this meeting all about? Was it only about the optics? Was it an icebreaker? Or will it really lead to a roadmap for the future of a so-called Naya Kashmir? In a moment from now, I'll be joined by the former Chief Minister of Jammu and Kashmir, Omar Abdullah. But first, take a look at what happened at that meeting.
A bid to remove Dilli se Duri and Dil ki Doori. A pledge to bridge the distance between Srinagar and the capital. A pledge to win people's heart. That was Prime Minister Narendra Modi's biggest message in his meeting with political leaders from Jammu and Kashmir that lasted 3.5 hours. The centre and the representatives from J&K walked the tightrope as they agreed on some issues and dodged others. The Modi government said it is keen to hold elections, but delimitation needs to be completed first.
जम्मू कश्मीर को यूनियन टेरिटरी का दर्जा दिया गया। वो यूनियन टेरिटरी जो है वो वहाँ चाहे वो जम्मू के लोग हों चाहे वो कश्मीर के लोग हों वो इस यूनियन टेरिटरी को बिल्कुल नहीं पसंद करते। इसमें फुल स्टेटहुड विद J&K cadre restored to J&K, not UT cadre, not any other cadre. J&K must be restored its full statehood and must be restored its own independent cadre.
प्रधानमंत्री जी ने कहा कि जम्मू कश्मीर में लोकतांत्रिक प्रक्रिया से जुड़े अगले महत्वपूर्ण कदम यानी विधानसभा चुनाव की तरफ हमें मिलकर जाना है। इसके लिए डीलिमिटेशन की प्रक्रिया को तेजी से पूरा करना होगा।
The main flashpoint, Article 370, remained untouched. The Kashmiri parties wanted it back. The centre refused to address the issue, claiming the matter is in the courts. The centre, though assured, statehood will be restored, but at the right time. Emerging from the meeting, the PDP chief issued clarification on her demand for talks with Pakistan.
मैंने उनको कॉम्प्लीमेंट किया, आपने पाकिस्तान से बात की, सीज फायर कराया, बहुत अच्छी बात है, इन्फिल्ट्रेशन कम हुई, बहुत अच्छी बात है। अब अगर जम्मू कश्मीर के लोगों को सुकून मिलता है, आराम मिलता है, उसके लिए अगर आपको पाकिस्तान से फिर बात करनी पड़े, करनी चाहिए।
The Prime Minister's outreach program saw a thaw in relations between the Jammu Kashmir leaders and the centre. With the Home Minister spelling out the contours for the map ahead, the Prime Minister added a dash of personal touch. Now all eyes are on the Delimitation Commission before the electoral process can be rolled out. With video journalist Pawan, this is Mosmi Singh in Delhi for India Today.
My first guest who's joining me today, Omar Abdullah, former Jammu and Kashmir Chief Minister, joins us. Appreciate your joining us, Mr. Abdullah. I want to understand at the very outset, a year ago when I spoke to you, or soon after you were released from house arrest, you had said very clearly what is there to talk with Delhi about. Now you've come to Delhi, spoken to the Prime Minister over 3.5 hours. What changed? What did you really talk about? What was this meeting about?
We talked about everything. We talked about the disconnect between the people of Jammu and Kashmir and the rest of the country. We talked about the concerted attempts being made to add to this mistrust rather than to bridge it. We talked about our unwillingness to accept the unilateral changes that were forced on Jammu and Kashmir on the 5th of August 2019. We reiterated our commitment to use peaceful, constitutional, legal means to have this change overturned. And we came to listen to the Prime Minister. We wanted to hear what the Prime Minister had to say vis-a-vis his outlook for what the next steps in Jammu and Kashmir are going to be.
No, so what is the change? I want to understand. I'm unable still to understand what is the change that has taken place either in your stand or that of the Prime Minister beyond the fact that the two groups, or really the valley-based parties and the Prime Minister and the BJP, met over a cup of tea. What has really changed on the ground? Has the trust deficit been bridged? The Dilli ki Duri?
No, it hasn't, but there is a first step has to be made somewhere, and the Prime Minister made the first step. Nothing in terms, when you say what has changed in our stand, nothing has changed in our stand. Nor was changing our stand a precondition to this talk, because if it had been, these talks wouldn't have taken place. We weren't asked to drop our demand for rolling back what happened on the 5th of August 2019. We weren't asked to withdraw our case from the Supreme Court. We weren't asked to stop our opposition to what had been done to the state of Jammu and Kashmir in 2019. So as far as we are concerned, nothing in our stand changed whatsoever. We came and we put exactly those points in front of the Prime Minister, and in all fairness to the Prime Minister, he did not stop us from speaking. He did not interrupt us when we spoke. Those who got a chance to speak spoke freely and said some things that perhaps would not have been very pleasant listening for the representatives of the Government of India in that meeting, but they heard us out patiently, and that's as good as we can expect at the moment.
No, sir. I'm sorry to be persistent. I'm trying to understand, were you given any assurances that have led you to believe that this is more than just about optics? There is one view, the cynical view, that this is just about optics, that there is pressure on the Government of India from the Americans, from the American withdrawal in Afghanistan, from what's happened along the line of actual control, all of which has led to this meeting. Nothing has changed on the ground in Srinagar in particular, and Delhi also is not willing to concede to your demand for statehood or indeed your demand for a repeal of Article 370.
I'm sorry, but who said New Delhi is not considering the demand for statehood? None of us who were sitting in that meeting got that impression. We were told that statehood would be restored.
You were told that statehood will be restored within a specific time frame, or were you told that after delimitation? Surely a meeting like this was not about delimitation. Did you get, you're making an important point. You're telling me you got the impression distinctly that the government is ready to restore statehood.
I have come back from that meeting with two distinct impressions. That the Government of India is very keen to hold early elections to restore elected popular government to Jammu and Kashmir, and the Government of India is very keen to restore statehood to the people of Jammu and Kashmir.
Were you given a roadmap, or do you believe that that will require more meetings?
Well, obviously you don't expect everything to be rolled out in the very first meeting. This is the first time most of us have met the Prime Minister in almost 2 years. There is a long way to go towards addressing some of the distance and the gap, as the Prime Minister himself said, Dilli se Duri or Dil ki Duri. There is a lot of that even within the four walls of the meeting hall this afternoon. So I don't think anybody expected that one meeting would resolve everything. It's like I said in the beginning, this is the start of a process. The Prime Minister invited us, and I, for one, was keen to hear what he had to say, and that's it.
And I'm getting from you a definite sense of softening towards the Prime Minister. Looks like whatever the Prime Minister served you, both in terms of the fact that he listened to you and
Rajdeep, that's your own impression. I can't disabuse you of the notions that you want to develop.
The reason I'm saying it, Mr. Abdullah, I don't sense the anger I sensed in you when you were released after 9 months that you spent behind Is the anger over now? Is the anger over? Is the bitterness over?
I don't wear my heart on my sleeve. That's never been who I am. I've always been an extremely reserved person in how I express how I feel. And I'm not going to change that just to put on an act for somebody's enjoyment. I am who I am. I feel the way I feel. And those of us who participated in this meeting and those who got an opportunity to speak, believe me, they left no stone unturned to let the Prime Minister know exactly how they felt about the way the people of Jammu and Kashmir and specifically how we were treated after 5th August 2019. You may or may not get to hear direct quotes of what was said, but believe me, I was in the room, I heard the people who spoke, and they didn't leave any stone unturned to make their feelings known.
Can you give me a direct quote that you or your father,
No.
Dr. Farooq Abdullah, gave the Prime Minister? You're saying you did plain speaking. I want to understand. When you say plain speaking, can you tell us what the plain speaking was about?
No, Rajdeep, I'm not going to give you direct quotes. We were invited by the Prime Minister to speak. We spoke to the Prime Minister. We said what we had to. What I will tell you is that we spoke very plainly. We made it known to the Prime Minister how we felt about what happened on the 5th of August 2019, how we felt about the trust deficit, how we felt about the steps that needed to be taken to rebuild that trust that had been lost, and what we felt should be done to bridge this gap between New Delhi and the people of Jammu and Kashmir.
So what can you give us therefore a sense, because Mehbooba Mufti came out of the meeting and she was asked a question on Pakistan and whether Pakistan should be part of the dialogue process. Do you also support that this has to be a wider dialogue process, a sustained dialogue process before you reach some end point?
Come on, Rajdeep, let's not live in sort of denial. There is already a process ongoing with Pakistan. It may very well be tracked too, but there is a process that is going on, and neither government has denied it. We have read reports in newspapers today that there has been some amount of back-channel conversation between the Indian and the Pakistani governments at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization meeting. So I'd like to believe that this is already ongoing. And so be it. I've never been opposed to dialogue. I'm a strong votary of good relations between the two countries. No lesser leader than Prime Minister Vajpayee said that you can change your friends, you can't change your neighbors. Whether we like it or not, Pakistan is a neighbor of ours. We're not going to get to change that neighbor. So we need to learn to live with each other. And if there is a track to dialogue, I'm all for it, and I hope it makes progress.
You know, you said that you don't wear your anger on your sleeve or you don't wear your scars on your sleeve, but I must ask you, just 6 months ago, Amit Shah, the Home Minister, described you and other valley-based parties as the Gupkar gang. And he made various accusations, including virtually accusing you and others of being anti-national. Was any of that raised in today's meeting, or has all the acrimony now been set aside?
Are you asking me to speak for the Home Minister of India? I obviously will not do that, except to say that the Home Minister of India did not call us the Gupkar gang in this meeting, and the Home Minister heard us out patiently, didn't interrupt any of the people who spoke, listened to whatever we had to say, and as a first step, I think it's a good beginning.
So the final question is, you said this is a first step, it's a good beginning. In your view, are you saying that to achieve any kind of conclusive result, beyond just being an icebreaker, restoration of statehood and return of Article 370 are prerequisites? Are there any preconditions at all that you all are setting for elections to be held in the valley?
Look, Rajdeep, I've made this point in the past, I'll make it again. It is pointless to ask this government to restore Article 370 to us. They're not going to do it, and I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to make the demand just for optics.
Okay.
It is pointless to ask the Narendra Modi government to restore Article 370 when they are the architects of taking it away. Our fight for the restoration of Article 370 and to win back what was snatched from us on the 5th of August 2019 will take place in the Supreme Court. It is a constitutional, legal, political battle, and we will continue to wage it. As more than one speaker in the meeting today reminded the Honorable Prime Minister and Home Minister, it took about 70 years for the BJP to fulfill its commitment to remove Article 370. Hopefully, we won't have to wait 70 years to fulfill our commitment to get it back. Whether it's 70 weeks or 70 months, we're in it for the long haul. And we will take this to its logical conclusion.
Will you fight an election if Article 370 remains repealed?
Look, I have made it very clear I'm not looking to fight any assembly elections in the near future. I don't see any reason why I should change that.
That's not a clear answer. Will the National Conference fight an election in Jammu and Kashmir if Article 370 is not restored?
The National Conference fought the DDC elections. The National Conference is a mainstream political party. We're not the Hurriyat.
Okay. As I said, Omar Abdullah, I sense less of anger and I sense more of a willingness now to allow this dialogue process to hopefully reach its logical conclusion, which would be restoration of statehood, presumably at the very least. Good to see you smiling. The last time we spoke, you were far more angry. So you seem to have softened, if I may say so.
You've got me on a good day. That's not to say you won't find me on an angry day someday, but let's just say you perhaps got me on a slightly better day today.
Okay, good. It appears that the Prime Minister's tea or whatever else he served you has at least had some impact. Good to hear you and being very clear as always. Thank you very much, Omar Abdullah, for joining me on what happened at that meeting with the Prime Minister. Let's go to my next guest, because I'm now going to be joined by another individual who was there at the meeting, also from the Kashmir Valley, but a slightly different perspective. Sajjad Lone, People's Conference chairperson, is now joining me. Sajjad, appreciate your joining us. Are you also coming out of the meeting looking suitably softened, that you actually believe that the dil ki doori between Delhi and Srinagar has been overcome by one cup of tea?
Rajdeep, I can tell you that I came out of the meeting feeling optimistic in the sense that I believe that it's dawned upon the union government that this is my reading of the situation, this is my reading of the meeting, that a phase of reconciliation needs to be started. Now, am I happy, am I not happy, given the context, given what happened in the last 2 years? You have to understand that this is a government which is going to run this country until 2024, and the new elections will be held. If there is any power on earth which can effect a change in J&K, it is this government. So there is no other way out but to do business with this government.
No, when you say do business with this government, this is the same government, Sajjad Lone, which detained you and other individuals for months together, which overnight repealed Article 370, which downsized your state from a state to union territories. None of that matters to you. All that is in the past. Has trust been restored so suddenly that you are saying that you are ready to do business with the same government that only a year ago all of you were cursing?
And what is the other option? Sit back and put our people at the mercy of bureaucrats. Yeah? What is the other option? You have to understand there are no options. And, yeah.
No, go ahead, go ahead.
And I can tell you something, is that, I can tell you is that they invited us. And in all humility, we all went there. And I could see that everybody put forward or reflected in their utterances the pain that is there in Kashmir, reflected it. I think they suitably reflected it, and all the other demands that they have. Now it's up to the union government how they take it, what happens in the future. But you know, the liberal, so-called liberal section in India, I at times wonder whether you lot are an illiberal lot or a liberal lot. You liberally watch the illiberal policies that have been implemented there, and then make, and the utterances are there which will impede deliverance, not facilitate deliverance. You have to facilitate deliverance. You cannot help us. The liberal sections of the Indian society cannot help us. They are not in power. They are not able to convince their fellow countrymen that they should not have rejoiced when August 5 took place, right? So you cannot possibly help us. But at least you should not facilitate a process where deliverance becomes impossible for the union government. This is a country of elections. There is an election every 6 months. What we say, what we do, if it puts pressure on a political government, means they walk away and we are there, at God's mercy.
No, what I'm finding interesting is you seem to be suggesting to me we had no option. What it appears, therefore, is that having revoked Article 370, which is part of the BJP's ideological agenda, having downsized your state to a union territory, having imprisoned you and others, you were pushed to the wall, and now you have come to this meeting with no options on the table but to accept in a way what the government of India has to offer to you. Is that one way? Am I right to interpret it that in a sense the parties, particularly of the valley, have been left with no option but to come to the dialogue table?
No, I don't think so. I think you are looking at it very pessimistically. I don't know why you're such a pessimist today.
I'm a cynic, sir. I'm sorry. I'll tell you why. Omar bhai, Sajjad bhai, I'm a cynic because I've seen what has happened over the years with Kashmir. You know, it's one step forward, one step back. I'm trying to understand, is today one step forward that will sustain, or will we go back one step back come tomorrow?
Rajdeep, I think we should, this is my point of view, that whatever we can get from this government for the people of J&K, we should forget what has happened to us, our personal pain of being locked up, we should forget about that. And when there is a liberal government, let us see what they do for us.
You know, that's a very...
When a liberal government comes in the at a future date, let's see what this...
No, Sajjad Lone, there have been so-called liberal governments. I use the word so-called. There have been governments, so-called liberal governments. There have been BJP governments. And since 30 years, there has been violence also that has carried out parallelly in the valley. Now, this government believes that one of the reasons why they had to act the way they did was because they believed the violence had reached an intolerable level. They wanted to control the situation. They have a very different view of the Kashmir Valley to previous governments also as well. Mr. Vajpayee spoke about insaniyat. Today, Prime Minister Modi has spoken about Dilli se Duri, and Dil ki Duri has to be narrowed down. Do you trust Prime Minister Modi or not? It's about trust. Do you trust that Prime Minister Modi means well for the people of Kashmir?
Well, he is our Prime Minister. We might not agree with him. We might be totally opposed to him, but he's the Prime Minister of India. Your Prime Minister, my Prime Minister. We have to trust him. Why can't we? We have to. There is no other way out. Rajdeep, we have to trust the Prime Minister. If we don't trust the Prime Minister, who do we? He says it publicly, says everything. You know, it's the esteem, the respect of the Prime Ministerial chair at stake when he makes a commitment, and this commitment is again as poetic as Vajpayee Saab's remark about insaniyat. And let's hope he charts that course, and we have to facilitate him and say, "Bakapia, do it." If we are cynics, that disincentivizes any movement towards delivering for the people of J&K. And let me tell you, as I was hearing Mr. Omar Abdullah, I was hearing, we have to be realistic also. This party, which is at power, has a very strong ideological agenda. We have to be realistic at what they can deliver. And as I told you, maybe I was slightly, trying to be slightly talking in a satirical context, but this is the reality. Let's see, you see, this Kashmir is a learning process for people of India. It will define the limits of liberalism and illiberalism.
Okay.
When I said that let a liberal government come, how different will be an alternative to BJP government beyond Kashmir? If it ever, if it comes to power in 24 or maybe 29 or maybe 34. Your guess is as good as mine. Kashmir is more about the two extremes of liberalism.
Okay,
and may I say, as on date, they coincide.
Okay, at the end of the day, can I ask you for a simple yes or no answer? Are you therefore willing to reach out, irrespective of the fact that your state has been downsized and Article 370 is not restored? These are not preconditions. Am I correct that you are also willing to in a way walk along with the government on this path of a dialogue, irrespective of whether statehood is restored or not? Correct or not?
You see, dialogue is a means to an end. The end is it will have to be, it won't be one go. One is to be very realistic. Nothing will be delivered in one go. But yes, statehood immediately would be a great thing in the medium run, short run, not in the very long run. Okay. But yes, in the medium run, after a process of dialogue. Yeah, and that's a means to a dialogue. We, the people of Kashmir, know it better than anybody else. That dialogue is the best way. Kashmiris have shunned dialogue in the past and paid very heavily. Whatever the dialogue, whosoever you're talking to, have faith in the institution of dialogue. Because if you lose in the faith in the institution of dialogue, in a place like Kashmir, the alternative to it is what? Violence.
Okay. Sajjad Lone, in a way, you're giving us a very interesting perspective as well, as always, on what's been happening in Jammu and Kashmir, what happened today. I appreciate your joining us on the show also to give us...
And Rajdeep,
yes.
Rajdeep, for a change, I'm also very humbly giving a perspective on the two extremes of liberalism and illiberalism in Indian politics and how, unfortunately, they've coincided.
Okay. Interesting argument that you made, as I said, Sajjad Lone. You also seem to be in a soft and mellow mood. Clearly, there was something in the chai that the Prime Minister has served all of you. Thank you very much, Sajjad Lone, also for joining
I didn't have chai. I didn't have chai.
What did you have?
I didn't have chai.
Kawa?
Nothing. No, I didn't. I had a glass of water.
Okay.
Water belongs to God.
Okay. Thank you very much, Sajjad Lone, also for joining me. Let me, in a moment, come to those who will analyze the bigger picture as well as get a Jammu perspective. But let's also look at what's happened in the Kashmir Valley since the Narendra Modi government scrapped Article 370 in August 2019, promising a Naya Kashmir. But instead, what's happened? Internet shutdowns following the abrogation of 370 that have crippled the local economy. Here's a ground report.
आपकी मन की आशंकाओं को जम्मू कश्मीर की जनता पर क्यों थोप रहे हो? मैंने इसी सदन में कहा है और फिर से कहता हूं कि इस बिल का जम्मू कश्मीर के स्टेटहुड से कोई लेन देन नहीं है। उपयुक्त समय पर जम्मू कश्मीर को स्टेटहुड दिया जाएगा।
A statewide shutdown after abrogation of Article 370 that lasted months. An internet shutdown that lasted 200 days. And then a pandemic-forced shutdown. For more than 2 years now, Kashmir has been in perpetual lockdown. The strict lockdown and internet blackout inflicted huge economic pain on the local residents. The state suffered losses running into hundreds of crores. No sector remained unaffected due to the restrictions.
जहां एक तरफ कोविड तो दूसरी तरफ हड़ताल और बंदिशें और कर्फ्यू, तो सारा कुछ आपके सामने है। शायद आज भी इसी हवाले से दिल्ली में कोई बातचीत कश्मीर के पॉलिटिकल लीडर्स और वज़ीर-ए-आज़म के दरमियान चल रही है। उम्मीद तो यही करेंगे कि सब कुछ बेहतर हो जाए।
आम लोगों में भी बहुत सी नाराज़गियां भी हैं और उम्मीद उनके बिल्कुल बरखिलाफ हुआ है 5 अगस्त 2019 को जो फैसला पार्लियामेंट ने किया।
The valley tourism sector suffered the most. Days before the abrogation of Article 370, the centre had asked all tourists to leave Kashmir, citing security concerns. The industry never picked up after that.
60% लोग मुंसलिक है और उनकी हालत नागुफ्तबे है। इसी तरह जो पढ़ाई का मसला हुआ है, हमारी नौजवान नस्ल जो हमारी नई जनरेशन है उन पर बहुत बुरा असर पड़ा है।
Education is the other sector that suffered. Schools and colleges were closed for long periods, and the months-long internet blackout added to the students' woes.
2 से 2.5 साल तक से यहाँ पे जो इकोनॉमिकल कंडीशन है इस वक्त जम्मू कश्मीर की, तो वो सब लोगों के सामने है और स्टूडेंट्स का नुकसान हुआ, इंडस्ट्री का नुकसान हुआ, शिकारे वालों का नुकसान हुआ, होटलियर्स का नुकसान हुआ, किसका नुकसान नहीं हुआ।
The centre says development and growth will come to the valley now because many roadblocks have been removed. The citizens of Kashmir say the wait seems to be longer than expected. With Shujaul Haq in Srinagar, Bureau Report, India Today.
So can the Prime Minister's meeting really end the Dil ki Doori with Kashmir? Are elections the key to it? What really explains the thaw in relations between Delhi and Srinagar. Professor Amitabh Mattu, from Jawaharlal Nehru University, one of the country's premier analysts on Jammu and Kashmir, Kashmir watcher, J&K watcher for years. Ranbir Pathania, BJP spokesperson, is also with us from Jammu. I'll come to you, Professor Mattu, in a moment. But let me just get a quick BJP perspective, because Ranbir Pathania, the BJP has been calling for, in a sense, Jammu's rights to be restored. The Prime Minister today has invited all parties. He invited the so-called Gupkar gang as well. Do you see this as an icebreaker? Yes. Are you satisfied with what has come out of the meeting?
Yes. Absolutely, Rajdeep. We are as a whole satisfied. Everybody has come with a positive mood. Irrespective of conflicting ideologies and standpoints, one thing which is appreciative that on peace and development, almost everybody has a broader consensus on it. The ice has been broken, and how Jammu and Kashmir could be taken forward. A virtual blueprint. No doubt, I was hearing you earlier also. You accused Omar Abdullah.
I don't know
that
what
Omar
is the
Sahab,
blueprint.
you said, what to talk of new...
I don't know what is this blueprint.
Sir, blueprint is... I am coming to it, sir. Post 5th of August 2019, first of all, unrolling of the political process in Jammu and Kashmir should have a duly elected government in place. Secondly, what we could say very, very, very precisely and very properly, delimitation. More so ever, there have been cries, this area has been delimitated, this area has been discriminated, this area has been neglected, a very, very comprehensive delimitation. And sorry, I need to correct your part, not for Jammu, BJP stands for Jammu and Kashmir. The entire Jammu and Kashmir should get justice, delimitation, political process, and first of all, a people's government with full support on everlasting peace and development from the central side. This is virtually the blueprint which should have been formed, despite all conflicting
and with full
ideologies,
statehood.
as I said, on peace and development, with full statehood. We are committed to it with full statehood. This is what it has been reiterated by the Home Minister on the floor of the Parliament, sir. And today also it has again been reiterated. And let's keep our fingers crossed. This happy moment comes. Jammu and Kashmir is a state, was a state, and will remain a state ever, though this is an intervening period, and it will also come over.
Okay, let me come to you now, Professor Mattu. We've heard all the politicians. I want you to give us a sense. First, I want to ask you the question many are asking. Why now? Why suddenly? What has changed? Is it the belief that the geopolitics of the region is changing, the back channel talks with Pakistan, the Americans pulling out of Afghanistan, a Biden administration putting pressure on the Modi government to restore statehood in Kashmir? What's changed that suddenly you have the same Gupkar gang of 6 months ago, now VVIPs at the Prime Ministerial high table?
I think two things have changed. First of all, let me also make it clear that I don't think international pressure works on India on Jammu and Kashmir. In the early 90s, Rajdeep, you remember, Robin Raphael was Assistant Secretary of State with the Bill Clinton administration, with a weak coalition government of Narasimha Rao, and the Kashmir Valley was seeing the worst uprising in years. She questioned the accession of Jammu and Kashmir to India. Rao and his advisors didn't move an inch on J&K. Now, obviously, people prefer calm in the neighborhood, would like fewer irritants in bilateral relations. But in terms of actual pressure, I don't think that works in India. I think this whole bogey of the Taliban suddenly coming to our doorsteps is again a bogey. I've heard this before. I think Taliban is going to pose a huge problem in Afghanistan, but I don't think that that's an issue for Jammu and Kashmir. Talibanization is an issue for the subcontinent in a larger sense. In terms of the ceasefire, it's held on. And you have what you now see are differences between the army leadership and Pakistan. So I don't think pressure from Pakistan immediately is any sense of, or a desire to give Pakistan a face server is working at all. I think this, contrary to what people think, counterintuitively, at this moment, New Delhi realizes it can act from a position of complete strength. The border is calm. The valley isn't seeing any kind of discontent expressed on the streets. All the mainstream leaders seem to have recognized that politics ultimately is the art of the possible. So they're willing to enter into a dialogue. What better opportunity than now? So it's rather than say is New Delhi or Modi doing it under pressure? I think they have recognized that there is a window here. Let's try and make use of that opportunity. Obviously, in politics, you call someone names and you put them in jail. Yesterday and today, you'll be dining together. That's happened now. But that happened if you look at Kashmir even in the 1950s.
But what is the...
Sheikh Abdullah, just for a second.
Yes.
For 11 years. And then he came and stayed with Panditji in Tinmurti Bhavan. No one could accuse Panditji of being an illiberal.
No, so what has changed? I'm still trying to understand what is the roadmap. Let's put it this way. You're saying that the Prime Minister and the government are coming from a position of strength in a way. They've seen a window of opportunity. But what is the roadmap? I think
the roadmap has been, I've heard all the statements of the leaders. I think the person who has signaled what the roadmap has is Ghulam Nabi Azad. He talked about 5 different principles. One, restoration of statehood, complete statehood, not a partial statehood with a J&K cadre of IAS and IPS officers. Secondly, early elections. And that might happen following delimitation, but everyone will participate in a delimitation exercise, which will be seen as fair and impartial. Third is that there will be a stronger insurance in terms of domicile laws to prevent land alienation and job reservation. And that's a concern, frankly, in Jammu. And there are already caveats put within the domicile laws. And most importantly, and unfortunately, I do not often like to speak about my own community, the rehabilitation and the return with dignity and honor of the Kashmiri Pandits. This is the roadmap. I think the mainstream of Jammu and Kashmir seems to be reluctantly agreeing to this roadmap. Obviously, I think it's important for their political constituencies to keep the demand of 370 alive. Fortunately, it is sub judice, so you don't need to express it more robustly at the moment, given that the Honorable Supreme Court hasn't taken up the case. But what you are beginning to see, and if there are meetings which build on this today, are the emergence of almost a new consensus on Jammu and Kashmir. Will this consensus last? Can the constituency be expanded to bring in more stakeholders? Time will tell. Is the government of India serious? Will the leaders in Jammu and Kashmir face a backlash? I think we'll have to see that as well. But you have a new consensus emerging, which is what I think you should focus on.
Okay, so you're saying that this is the beginning, in a way, of a potentially new compact between Delhi and Srinagar, which should be welcomed. And time will tell whether it will last or whether it will be a false dawn. Professor Mattu, appreciate your joining us as well here on this special. Thank you both very much for joining me on our special today as we focused on Jammu and Kashmir. Now, my take. A week is a long time in politics. 22 months is an eternity. Much water has flowed under the Jhelum since Article 370 was repealed overnight. Chief ministers were jailed and J&K downsized to a union territory. Why only 7 months ago, Home Minister Amit Shah referred to the valley-based Gupkar alliance as an anti-national Gupkar gang. Today, the same gang members were VVIPs at the PM's high table. As an icebreaker, the meeting was useful. But beyond the optics, there is no clear roadmap yet for a Naya Kashmir. Clearly changing geopolitics in the subcontinent, back-channel talks with Pakistan, even China border tension and US pressure have all played a role in forcing the centre to climb down, as well as the Kashmiri leaders being pushed to the wall. The best way forward now is to restore statehood, hold elections. That's the only way to slowly restore the credibility of Dilli in the dill of people of J&K. Okay, let's give you a quick update on all that's been happening in the world of COVID 2.0. Just when the world thought that the end is near for the deadly virus, the variant we've been talking about, Delta Plus, a new mutant version of the Delta strain. Now 11 countries reporting cases of Delta Plus. India reporting its first death from Delta Plus variant. The 59-year-old woman in Ujjain who contracted the mutant during the second COVID wave has passed away. Her husband, who had taken the vaccine, survived COVID. German Chancellor Angela Merkel, meanwhile, said Europe is on thin ice in its battle against coronavirus. She added that the Delta variant threatens to impact the progress they have made in reducing infection. She's called for tougher EU travel rules to fight the Delta variant. Meanwhile, the US is going to send 3 million doses of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine to Brazil. The shipment is part of President Biden's pledge to send 80 million vaccines abroad. This comes at a time when Brazil has already lost 5 lakh people to the deadly virus. Okay, let's take a break at this point. When we return, a complete change and shift in mood. New Zealand are the world test